Well, welcome to a quick guide for teaching online. My name is Jason Garvey. I'm manager of instructional design here at Northampton Community College in the online learning education technology team. It's great to have everybody here. So today's topic is really about what are three quick ways that you can get going to teaching online. And so we're going to look at the three P's of online education, and that's going to be plan, prepare, and lastly, presence. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So when we think about planning the course, an analogy is you cannot fly a plane and build it at the same time. Number one, I don't know if the plane would fly, and number two, it'd be very dangerous to do that. So the analogy is there in terms if we think of online education. It is extremely untenable as a faculty member if I'm trying to teach the course and at the same time build the course out. It's like we've taken off with only partial wings, or we don't have all the propellers in gear, or we don't have all the pedals or all the instruments intact. And that doesn't mean that as you're teaching online, there aren't small or slight course corrections or things can be added, but it's not things that are gonna ground the plane at all. And so that's one of the biggest pieces in teaching online is planning and preparing and building out that course ahead of time, so that as the course is going on, you're not having to add weeks 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 in the middle of everything going on. So how do we plan our course? One of the best ways is to create a roadmap in terms of here's where we're going to start and here's where we're going to end. And so I always like to start with planning ahead for the end result of the course. So ask yourself, what do you want the learner to demonstrate or do upon their completion of this course? What is the skill, the project, or knowledge that they should have? As we think of a category for this, this would be called backwards design. But it's really just getting at what's the end goal, what's the ultimate goal, and we ask ourselves these types of questions all the time. What's the end goal of doing X, Y, or Z? And so here, as we are planning the course at the very outset, we're not looking in terms of, well, what can I include in the course, or what are all these tools and all this technology that I can put in there, but what's the end result? What do I want the student to be able to do? What's the skill? What's the project that they should have once they complete this course? So we think of projects in terms of research papers, right? In terms of case studies, in terms of survey results, and we think of skills in terms of more hands-on classes like nursing, like chemistry or automotive technician or engineering. What's that one skill that they should have that will help them in their career or in their next course? And the same for knowledge, right? What's the theory that they should understand? What's the main idea that I want them to take away with, and so that when they leave this course, they'll have knowledge of, Bloom's taxonomy or things like that, or some other theory that they can take into their next course or into their career. So that's the first P, is planning the course, is preparing the student for the end result. So you determining as the instructor, what is that end result? What is that final thing that I want them to do? And then you start to think in your as you plan the courses, how will I help the student to achieve this goal or complete this project or attain this knowledge? And that's where we get into the third one, which is prepare. So once you've identified the skill, knowledge, or project that the learner will have completed or attained by the end of the course, how will you prepare the student to complete that project? How will you prepare the student to complete that skill? How will you prepare the student to attain that knowledge? What are you going to be doing to help the learner along the way so that when they get to that final project, skill, or knowledge, they're prepared for it. They're ready. They have all the tools necessary. So one of the questions you can ask is, well, how is this skill, how is this project, how is this knowledge best learned? Is it best learned through demonstrations? Is it best learned through readings? Is it best learned through you lecturing to them? Is it best learned through them visiting some nursing lab, or some sort of like chemistry lab, or some like mechanics garage? What are the instructional methods? What are the instructional materials that you will employ to help your students achieve this knowledge, work towards this project, work towards this skill? And then you ask yourself, once you've determined what are those instructional methods, what are those materials that I'm going to be using that's going to help the learner along the way, then you ask, well, how will I determine that the learning has been achieved? How will I determine that skill or that project has been done? So really another way to ask that is, what are the assessments you'll be using during the course? And when we think about assessments, we think of it in two big categories. One is formative, and the other is summative. So when we think about formative, it's that forming along the way. It's that forming and guiding along the way. Formative assessments happen throughout the course, and they should happen naturally within the course. It shouldn't be forced. It shouldn't be something that is divorced from the course itself. So when we think about formative assessments, one of the biggest ones that come to mind is usually forums. And again, in that forum and in that formative, we have similar verbiage there. But the forums, right? So the students are taking something that they've learned in the instructional methods / the instructional materials, and they're putting it into place in a formative way, in a forming way that occurs throughout the course. And in that formative assessment, these are typically low stakes assessment. They're typically not highly graded one on their own. Each one takes up a small portion of their grade, and it doesn't feel as though there's a whole lot of the weighted grade book, or a whole lot of the grade book is weighted towards this assessment. But it is a crucial assessment, and it is a formative assessment that you're helping them. The other one is the summative, right? And that occurs at the end of the course. Typically, this is a high stakes assessment. Perhaps the grading is heavier weighted. There's a little more nervousness about it. And typically, when we think of summative assessments, the big category or the big item that comes to mind is exams, a final exam. It could even be a midterm exam. That could be a form of summative assessment, because you're assessing their knowledge of something that they've learned up until a point. So when we think about summative, we're thinking about, exams, papers, e-portfolios, maybe a teaching showcase, maybe some sort of large group project that they have to present. But when we think about formative assessments, we have to think about, well, what are the components of that summative assessment that I can have students submit along the way? So for instance, if they're doing an e-portfolio and they have to have several different artifacts, right? Perhaps you are asking them to submit those artifacts along the way. And in that, you're able to provide feedback to the student, to let them know what they've done well, what they can work on better. But it's not as though they're submitting all that at one time without receiving any sort of formative feedback for their project. When we think about a group project, or maybe the student has to work on a case study and has to report back on these things, or has to write some sort of a paper on it, are there ways you can incorporate parts of that assignment, like check-ins along the way, but they're submitting portions of it, and it could be graded portions in which they're submitting, but they're submitting portions along the way for you to provide feedback to them. So then when you get to the end of the course, they are still working on it, but now they're able to take these components where you've provided exceptional feedback on, and they can then put into their final project. So by doing that, you're actually helping prepare and lead the learner to successfully complete that project. I remember one course I took, the final exam was at 75% of the total course grade. And it's terrified us because we thought, I don't know how I've been doing in the course, and so much is weighted on a 2-hour exam. And that was just a bad way of teaching. That was a bad way of assessing our knowledge, because along the way we weren't assessed for anything. We were given 10% for I think it was like 10 or 15% as long as we participated in the live classroom sessions, and we had to do these little mini papers along the way that were again made up 10 or 15% of the grade. But we got to the end of the course and we had a 75% exam, and so that wasn't helpful for us because we weren't led along the way to be prepared for this type of exam and to put that much weight on one project. You can do that, but are you allowing the students to submit items along the way that make up that 75%? So that's what we think of when we think of preparing the student. The last one to talk about is instructor presence. So the presence of the faculty in the course. So let's say you are a new student and your name is Marty, and they've signed up. He's just signed up for his first online course, and they're nervous about taking an online course. So a week before the class starts, he receives he receives an email from his instructor. And so these are 3 possible emails that I have seen sent out. Which email do you think would help Marty feel less nervous and be most prepared for the course before it begins? So email number 1, the instructor tells the class, again, this is 5 days before class starts, that all students have to read chapters 1 through 4 of the textbook prior to the start of class. Students must also write a 3-page paper summarizing the reading. Email number 2, the instructor includes the syllabus, and inside the syllabus are directions on how to access the learning management system, some of the technical requirements, where to go if they need technical support, netiquette policies, contact information, and perhaps the instructor even has an introduction video. And then there's instructions for their first assignment, which in this email that he's sending out is not a 3-page paper, but is rather a introduction form where the students get to know each other. Email 3, the instructor informs the class of their pedigree, their expertise in the area, various companies they've worked with, and that they are unquestionably the authority in this field and in this classroom. So, which email do we think would be most beneficial for the student? Which one would make them feel less nervous and be prepared for the course? Well, if we select email 1, we notice that Marty gets a little angrier. And rightly so. I mean, he's not been prepared to write a 3-page paper. He doesn't know what format it should be in. He doesn't know if he can use outside resources. He doesn't know if he should have a certain amount of footnotes or a certain amount of resources to use. He doesn't know if there's a specific topic he should be summarizing, or if he should just be summarizing all of the chapters. He just doesn't know. If we look at email number 3, again, this doesn't change Marty's mood at all, because he's not really looking for that from his instructor. He's looking for guidance. He's looking for a sort of a welcome to the course. Here's how you get started. Nothing's been addressed in terms of where do I go to access these things. So, email number 2, Marty looks happy, and in this, we have provided the student a lot of information, but we have given it in such a way that will help them be prepared for the course. And we've also introduced a component, which is faculty presence. By having contact information, by having and intro video from the instructor, we've provided a little bit more of a personality for this course. Now, that's not to say in this second email that you can't talk about, who you've worked for, your expertise in the area, but it might be helpful to format it or to formulate it in such a way of, here's my passion for this subject, here's why I'm teaching this subject to you, and here's why you should be passionate about it. And that will help, hopefully, students feel passionate about taking it with you. So we could talk about some of the theories that are out there behind presence, and this, there's one out there called I think it's the Community of Inquiry Model, COI, but I think it's more helpful to offer up some practical ways to incorporate a sense of presence in your online course. So, like I said before the course, send out a welcome email with some orientation materials. Post that as well inside the learning management system for the student, inside your course shell. That will just be helpful. Have students introduce themselves. You introduce yourselves, and have students introduce yourself to each other. Think about having students complete a self-assessment. Where do I stand in terms of online education? Have I taken one before? How do I feel about this? Have upfront weekly virtual office hours. And of course, this is for if your course is not meeting synchronously online, but is more of an asynchronous course that doesn't have virtual office hours or isn't some form of a hybrid. But it would be kind of a free-form office hour where students know they can come ask you questions. If this isn't feasible to do, then I would highly encourage you to have a student to instructor forum. And in that, students can post questions, because oftentimes you will undoubtedly get the same questions from multiple students. So rather than sending an email, can they post that into a forum where you can respond, and when a student asks the same question again, you can just tell them, well, please go back to this forum, or scroll up a little bit and you'll see my response to that. During the course, it's important to send out weekly emails or announcements where you wrap up the previous week, and you make a link between the week you were just in and the week that's upcoming, or the module that's upcoming. During this, it's important for the students to be reminded of what is due, and to let them know how will what just happened last week help you this week, and how will what happens this week help you prepare for the final project, for the final exam, for the final skill. Along the way, we talked about having formative assessments, and so this is where we want to provide timely, informative feedback to the students that helps them be prepared, and that helps them feel guided along the way. We want to welcome students to submit rough drafts of assignments along the way, and these don't have to be graded, but something where students can say, this is what I've done so far, how does this look? And so periodically have them submit those rough drafts, provide feedback to them, let them know what they're doing well, let them know what things could use some work on, or could be adjusted. Have them submit assignments in part, to have that feedback, and again, those could be the graded components of that, where they have to have an e-portfolio, and they have to submit so many artifacts, and so we're going to submit three different pieces of that portfolio. Also, think about doing twice a semester check-ins with students, whether that's sending an email, or whether it's inviting them to some sort of video conference with you, or something like along those lines, but just reaching out to them individually and ask them, how's it going? If you do group projects, again, have the group submit items up along the way. That way they're not just working on this project and way off base, and then they submit it and realize, oh, we didn't do it the right way. Another thing to do during the course would be to provide students with example projects from previous classes that are exemplar projects. That's a great way to have a little bit of presence built in. And again, you don't have to do much other than ask for permission from the previous student. But it's a great way to say, here's an example, and here's how I'm guiding you along the way. After the course is over, send a wrap-up email. Thank them for being in the course, for all their efforts, and let them know what the next steps should be. If they're in a degree program, what's the next course they should take? Or if they are passionate about something in this course, let them know of other course offerings that are out there. Have students do a course evaluation. Also, be sure to provide timely feedback for the final project or exam. Let them know this is how long after you submit it, and this is how long after you submit the assignment, and by which you'll get your grade back or feedback. Offer to support students if they have further questions about anything in the course. Just open that dialogue up. So those are the 3 P's: plan, prepare, and presence of online education. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, here are 2 great resources that deal with how to be there for distance learners, and then the 2014 book is it's a guide to online course design, and it's helping students to succeed in your course. So thank you for attending, and hope to see you all soon.